Good afternoon, creative writers. Thank you for your patience while I'm out for an extended bit of time. However, I do want to be able to give you good feedback so that you can turn in your best possible final drafts for this Wednesday. Today in class, you should be doing your second set of Critical Friends groups in order to get feedback from your peers on your character-based rough draft. Also, you now have feedback from me on your very first story, and you get feedback using the creative writing rubric. So the thing I want to start with is just helping you understand what's on the rubric a little bit. The rubric is split into two competencies. There's the A competency and the N competency. A is the structure. And you'll see that I made a mistake. I had to scribble it out. It's supposed to be out of 25. It's 30 on the rubric that you have in front of you. Structure refers to the story that you told, the plot that you have, the characters that you've developed, the ideas that you've come up with, having a theme, a reason that the story exists, good details, imagery, order of events. That's the story. And then N, the communication, that is the document that you turned in. Does it actually communicate that story well? That has a lot to do with audience and purpose, so good grammar, appropriate tone, sentence structure and style, and of course also just making sure that the document is MLA formatted correctly. So these do work together, but it certainly is possible to tell a good story, but then have poor writing. So if you want to split it in your head that way, that the first two sections, that's about the story that you told. The second two sections, that's about how you wrote the story. And they do work together. So it is possible that if you have a particularly poor writing style, you're not going to be able to communicate a good story, and so that could affect your score up here, or they could be more separate. But that's how the competencies work. All right? So use the rubric, use the comment down here. I always try to give you one good insight that's positive and one that is critical. And I also write on your paper. And then, for all of you, I noticed some particular behaviors that were cropping up more than once, and so I want to address them so that everybody knows that these things can be fixed. As soon as your Critical Friends groups are done today, you can take a look at your rough draft and fix it for your final draft. All right? I had a lot of stories that were turned in that were just one paragraph long, so don't be afraid to start those new paragraphs. Crack open your SSR book, take a look at how many sentences long paragraphs are in that professional piece of literature or textbook, and you'll see that sure, some paragraphs are 15, 17 sentences long, but many are just 2 to 3 sentences long. So let's move away from volume, trying to have an academic paper that impresses the teacher with how big your paragraphs are. Let's have a reason for when we start new paragraphs. Remember, you are the movie director, and you are taking the reader's eyeballs and you're pointing them where they need to go. If you point those reader eyeballs at one big wall of text, they're going to get lost. It's like looking at one thing for way too long. They get bored, they don't want to make it through the paragraph. Paragraphs break up the action. I did see, for those who tried dialogue, lots of dialogue mistakes in the formatting. So take a look at that dialogue packet and make sure that your dialogue is formatted correctly. I also read a lot of stories that read more like journal entries. A character would be speaking to the reader and saying, "This story happened to me, let me tell you about it." I'd much rather have a story that shows the scene that the character is talking about. So let's make up a hypothetical sad story where a character at the age of 10 had a dad who said he was going to go out to the gas station for a 32-ounce Diet Pepsi, and dad never came back. A lot of times I'd have stories where the characters say, "When I was 10, I'll never forget. It was really sad. Still affects me today." And so the character is imploring, "I'm sad, please believe me." What I want is I want to see the scene where that dad slams that door, the character's left behind the door on the other side, they're looking at the color of the paint, the way it's chipped, and they hear the car driving off, and you feel the sad music, and the scene plays out in front. And then the reader will know that that was a traumatic event or a happy event. Remember, stories don't necessarily have to be sad. But We'll talk more about show, not tell, when we move into our imagery and setting unit. So, more on that. But then I have some examples of tense consistency, active voice, and parallel structure. And this is technical enough that it's the whole reason I decided to do a screencast. So I made some examples of these mistakes. In this paragraph here, we have a problem with tense consistency. When you're writing a story, you want to make sure that you are either in past tense, as in the narrator is in the present and talking about something that has already happened, or you want to write in present tense, which means the narrator is relaying the information to the reader as it is happening to him or her. Traditionally, most stories are told in past tense. You can tell it in either, but whatever you pick, you need to be consistent. So let's take a look at this story. Yesterday, Charlie had the most amazing day at the park. The park is teeming with his doggy friends. They run everywhere, barking with delight now that they see each other. Charlie really enjoyed it. Right? In this first sentence, because of the word had, it is taking place in the past. But a lot of times after setting a story up to be in the past, when relaying the action as authors that are just so excited to make tales that are exciting and filled with action-packed information, you're switching up your verbs and going with is, or an active verb like run, which is good. We'll get to active verbs in a second. But the problem with is and run is that that's present tense. So you have a story that was supposed to take place in the past tense, and you've suddenly switched it so now it's taking place in the present tense. And then often when you'd finish telling it, you'd once again, here's an ed, so we know enjoyed, that's past tense. So this paragraph doesn't have tense consistency. So to fix it, we need to change our verbs so that they are past tense verbs. The park teemed with his doggy friends. They ran everywhere, barking with delights now that they saw each other. And now I need to fix this a little bit more. This will happen. Now it's fixed. All right, that's tense consistency. Moving on to the next bit. When you're looking at those verbs, let's try to find active verbs. So here's a story that from here to here, the tense consistency is fine. I have was telling, she saw, I was listening intently, I could not before. Believe, that's all happening in the past tense. So that's fine, but these verbs aren't very interesting. It's much better if Susie, even though it's in the past, Susie is the subject of this sentence and she should be doing the action. So take a look through your story and see if you can find was or is or were, all things that are verb forms of the verb be, because those are actually helping another verb, usually with an ing, so that's how you could find them. And there's no reason that this verb shouldn't be the star of the show. This sentence could be fixed and made more interesting if it's Susie told me about this great movie she saw and I listened intently. Now Susie and I are rightfully the protagonists in this story. The other thing, that's looking for verbs that could be more active or having a more active voice. And finally, this last sentence talks about, or has the mistake of poor parallel structure. When you have a list like this, and so we see a list, we know we have a list because we have this comma, right? And we have and here. Every section of that list, every part of that sentence needs to have the same verb form. That's called having a parallel structure. So when I'm talking about this movie that Susie tells me about, I couldn't believe that the movie had people jumping, characters that make wild inventions, and a dog that talks. This one can be hard to catch because we talk like this. Doesn't sound like bad grammar, but it is. And when you see the difference, you can sort of see it. Here I have jumping. Here I have that make. Those are two different verb forms. So to change it, since I decided when I started the sentence to go with people jumping, I'm going to say that now, since the subject of this section is characters, the verb's going to be making wild inventions, and a dog that talks, that shouldn't be that, it should be a talking dog. Right? I've changed everything so that it has the same verb structure. If I got to the end of this and I didn't like that and I wanted to do a different verb, it's no problem. Whoops, too much, too far. We have to go back. Okay. What if I like that make? People that jump, characters that make wild inventions, and a dog that talks. I could go change that way as well, as long as my verbs are consistent with one another. All right, so these small fixes, I didn't fix my story at all, but making those fixes and conventions, that of course is going to improve my communication competency score, but it's also going to make my story clearer, and so it'll make my story score go up as well. I will see you soon. Good luck. Have a great CFG day.